Thanksgiving used to be my favorite holiday. The food, the crisp air, the way the whole family packed into one house like clowns into a car. I loved the chaos, until I became the villain in it. My name's Alex, I'm 29, and for the first time in my life, I didn't get the invite. No text, no call, no what time are you coming? Just silence. I found out about the dinner from a photo my uncle posted. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. But I guess I should rewind. I'm the oldest of three, the responsible one, according to every report card my mom ever signed. Growing up, that meant I got blamed first when something broke, praised last when something worked, and somehow always ended up driving everyone to school, even when I didn't have gas money. My sister Lena is 26, works part-time as a social media strategist, whatever that means, and still lives at home. My brother Josh is 22, rides a motorcycle he can't afford, and once borrowed my laptop for a semester without asking. Spoiler, I never got it back. My mom is complicated. The kind of woman who can make you feel guilty for sneezing too loud. She's obsessed with appearances. Don't post that. I don't want people to think we're messy. And talks like our family is some kind of dynasty when, really, we're just a middle-class household in upstate New York with a leaky roof and a very judgmental cat. My dad, he left when I was 16. Another story for another time. So when I graduated college early, got a job in commercial real estate, and bought a house before I turned 28, I expected maybe a little acknowledgement. Instead, my mom acted like I'd betrayed her by not staying close to home. And by close, she meant emotionally codependent and financially tethered. Last year's Thanksgiving ended in disaster. Josh showed up drunk. Lena brought some guy she just met on Tinder, and when I suggested maybe next year we keep things smaller, my mom turned on me like I'd kicked her dog. You always think you're better than us, she snapped, slapping down the mashed potatoes so hard they sprayed onto my shirt. Maybe next year. Stay home if it's so unbearable. It was one of those comments meant to sting, but not stick. Or so I thought. Fast forward to this year. November rolled around, and I waited. I wasn't going to beg for an invite. I've grown past that, but I assumed someone would reach out. A text, a meme, a vague, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? But the closer we got, the more the silence buzzed in my ear. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday. I was on my lunch break, eating a lukewarm sandwich and watching reruns of Shark Tank when my phone rang. Mom. Hey, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I just wanted to be clear so there's no confusion, she said immediately. We're keeping things simple this year. Just the core family. It's been a tense year, Alex. And I think everyone could use a little less drama. I blinked. Core family. I'm your son. I know that, she said, defensive now. But you bring tension. You always have opinions. You make people feel judged. I make people feel judged. I repeated, stunned. Mom, Lena brought a stranger to Thanksgiving last year who stole our blender. It was a misunderstanding, she snapped. Don't twist things. Josh literally started a fight in the driveway, I said, my voice rising. Because you provoked him. You always think you're above everyone. And there it was. That line she always throws when she doesn't want to admit she's playing favorites. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. I stared at my phone, trying to figure out whether I felt more hurt or more angry. Both, I guess. I decided to spend Thanksgiving alone. Roasted a chicken, made instant potatoes, even lit a candle like a sad parody of domestic bliss. I was doing fine. Really, I was, until my phone buzzed at 7:12 p.m. It was a photo from Uncle Rob. The caption read, "Finally, a peaceful holiday." I zoomed in. My mom, beaming. Josh, holding a beer. Lena, front and center, like she owned the place. Even my cousin Frankie made it, and he lives in Ohio. There was an empty chair at the table, a chair where I would have sat. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe spite. Maybe clarity. Maybe I was just done being the family punching bag. But I walked over to my filing cabinet, pulled out a manila folder, and snapped a photo of the property tax bill. You see, the house they were celebrating in? It's technically mine. When my dad left, he signed over his half of the property to me as part of an ugly legal agreement no one ever talks about. I paid off the liens, refinanced the mortgage, and let my mom stay rent-free out of guilt and obligation. But the taxes? Those are still under my name, and they were due the next day. So I sent the screenshot to Uncle Rob, who owns a landscaping business and had once offered to help me take the house off my hands for cheap. I typed, "They're due tomorrow. Good luck." 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. First call was from Mom, then Lena, then Josh, then back to Mom. 7 calls in a row, each ignored. Then the text started. What did you do? Alex, don't be like this. This is low, even for you. You're going to ruin Thanksgiving. I stared at the screen as it vibrated with panic. For once, they weren't ignoring me. For once, they realized I wasn't some forgotten side character in their picture-perfect narrative. But I didn't respond. Not yet. Because part of me wanted to hear what they'd say when I picked up. Whether they'd apologize. Whether they'd even try. Or whether this was just another performance in the long-running drama that is my family. And then, just as I reached for the phone, it stopped ringing. Everything went quiet. Until, ding, a voicemail. And what I heard in that message changed everything. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I let it sit there in my notifications like a wound I didn't want to poke. I poured myself a drink, something stronger than wine, and sat on the couch, watching the fire flicker on the TV screen because I didn't own a real fireplace. The chicken was already cold, the mashed potatoes untouched. Everything felt like a performance I didn't get to audition for. But eventually, curiosity chewed through the last thread of restraint, and I tapped play. It was my mother's voice. Tired. Flat. But there was no apology, no softening, not even a breadcrumb of remorse. Instead, she spoke like she was dictating a letter. Alex, she began. I don't know what that little stunt was supposed to prove, but if you think you can hold this family hostage just because you have your name on a piece of paper, you're mistaken. A pause. Then the real venom. You've always needed to feel important. You get that from your father. That same need to control everything. And just like him, you'll end up alone. I hope you're proud of yourself. I sat there, phone in hand, listening to the silence after her words like it could somehow fill in what she didn't say. No, we miss you. No, let's talk. Just a surgical strike to the gut and a cold click of disconnection. The voicemail only lasted 32 seconds. But I replayed it 3 times, like a fool trying to find a hidden meaning. Spoiler, there wasn't one. She meant every word. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking back to all the times I'd made excuses for her. For all of them. The birthdays where they forgot to call but got busy. The times I offered to help with bills and was told I was trying to buy their love. The holidays where I played the designated driver while Josh stumbled into the punch bowl and Lena live-tweeted family drama for clout. And through all of it, I told myself this was what families do. They bicker. They bruise. But they stay, right? Except I was always the one staying. Staying patient. Staying generous. Staying silent. Until now. I didn't respond to the voicemail. I didn't answer the texts or the missed calls. I took the next 2 days off work and drove out to the cabin my dad left me upstate. I hadn't been there in years. Not since he passed. It was old, dusty, and half-frozen, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was quiet. Out there, with no cell signal and only the sound of wind against the windows, I finally let myself feel it. Not just the anger, but the grief. Because that's what it was, really. Grieving a family that never truly saw me. Grieving a childhood spent trying to earn affection like it was a reward instead of a given. On Saturday, I came back to reality. My inbox was full. A few work emails. A spam message about car insurance. And 5 texts from Lena. You can't just ignore us. I don't know what you're trying to prove. This is seriously messed up. Are you even going to pay it? Don't make me come over. That last one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so completely Lena. She always thought showing up uninvited was some kind of power move. Sure enough, around noon, I heard the buzz of my apartment intercom. I ignored it. Then came the knock. Then the banging. Then the sound of someone trying to jiggle the door handle. I opened the door just enough to block the frame with my foot. Lena stood there in a puffy coat, sunglasses, and a look like she was walking into a courtroom instead of her brother's apartment. You're being a jerk, she said by way of greeting. Good to see you too. I'm serious, Alex. You're making everything worse. Do you have any idea what you've done? Reminded you the house isn't free? She rolled her eyes and pushed past me, making herself at home like she always did. She dropped onto the couch, kicked off her boots, and pulled out her phone like this was a routine visit. Mom's freaking out, she said, not looking at me. She's convinced you're going to evict her. I never said that. Well, you didn't say anything. Which, in Mom's world, is worse. I sat across from her, arms folded. Why are you really here, Lena? She hesitated, then said it, just like I feared she would. She wants to transfer the property into her name. I laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, stunned laugh that echoed in my chest. She wants to what? She said it's better if the house is legally hers. Less tension. That way you can't pull this kind of power play again. I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Let me get this straight. You all freeze me out of Thanksgiving. Mock me. Talk behind my back. And now you want me to hand over the deed? Just so you can keep pretending I don't exist. Lena shifted uncomfortably. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. No, I'm making it real. Maybe for the first time. She stood, clearly sensing the conversation was collapsing. Look, she said, her voice softening. I don't want to fight. I just want things to go back to normal. Normal for you means pretending I don't matter unless you need something. She winced. That's not true, isn't it? There was a long pause. Then she whispered something I wasn't expecting. She's planning to take legal action. That stunned me into silence. Legal action? For what? She's claiming Dad only gave you the deed because you manipulated him while he was sick. She says she's going to challenge the transfer. The room swayed a little. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and gripped the counter to keep myself steady. I thought I was angry before, but this was different. This was betrayal. Deep, calculated betrayal. She knows that's not true, I said, voice low. She thinks it is, Lena offered weakly. Or at least, she's convinced herself. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I did, I might say something I couldn't take back. Lena left not long after, mumbling something about trying to keep the peace. I didn't walk her out. That night, I dug out the old folder of legal documents. The deed transfer, the notarized letters, even the handwritten note from my dad, telling me, in shaky script, you earned this, Alex. Keep it safe. I stared at that note for a long time. My dad wasn't perfect. He left. He made mistakes. But he saw me. He trusted me. And now, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were trying to undo his last decision. For what? Spite? Control? I didn't sleep again that night. Sunday morning came with another surprise. Uncle Rob had posted a second photo. This one showed my mom standing on the porch, holding a piece of paper. The caption read, "Family stands together, no matter what." But what caught my eye wasn't the caption. It was the angle. The way the paper was tilted just enough for me to recognize it. It was a screenshot of my dad's signature. Cropped. Out of context. I zoomed in. Enhanced. Tilted. It was a move. A clear, calculated move. They were trying to get ahead of the narrative. Trying to spin it like I forged it. Like I was the ungrateful son out for revenge. That was the moment something broke in me. Not sadness. Not anger. Not even betrayal. Resolve. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Not for vengeance. Not yet. But to prepare. Because they wanted a war? They had no idea who they were messing with. I didn't answer any calls that week. Not from Lena, not from Josh, and definitely not from my mom. I ignored every ding, every ping, every just want to talk voicemail that sounded more like a veiled threat than an olive branch. It was easier to stay quiet, to say nothing. But inside, I was unraveling. Each day felt like I was walking underwater, heavy and slow, with invisible pressure pressing against my chest. The real punch to the gut came on Monday morning. I logged into my online banking to transfer funds for the property taxes, figuring maybe I'd pay it out of habit, just to keep things from exploding too fast, when I noticed something strange. A withdrawal. A big one. From an account I hadn't touched in months. I blinked at the screen. $2,400. Transferred via mobile app to Lena's name. I sat back, heart in my throat. How did she? Then I remembered. Months ago, I helped her set up a new budgeting system after one of her freelance gigs fell through. She'd lost a client, couldn't pay rent, and cried over the phone until I offered to help her get back on track. I created joint access to an emergency savings account under my name, just for her to use in case things got bad again. I told myself I was being smart, being generous. I told myself I could trust her. She must have kept the login. I called the bank and froze the account. Reported the unauthorized withdrawal. The rep on the phone apologized and told me they'd look into it. But we both knew how slow that process would be. I hung up without thanking her. That afternoon, I texted Lena a single question. Did you take money from my savings? Her response came instantly. I borrowed it. Mom needed it for a lawyer consultation. My jaw clenched. I typed, deleted, retyped. You stole it. It wasn't yours. You didn't even ask. She didn't deny it. Instead, she doubled down. I knew you'd freak out. That's why I didn't ask. You're so obsessed with control, Alex. It's pathetic. There it was again. The family refrain. Control. The word they all clung to whenever I set a boundary or enforced consequences. They called it controlling. I called it survival. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. Not because of the money, but because, after everything, they still saw me as a bank account with a bad attitude. That night, I sat in the dark and let myself spiral. I thought about cutting them off completely, changing my number, selling the house out from under them just to make a point. I pictured myself standing on the porch with a for sale sign while my mother screamed from the front window. The image should have made me feel better, but it didn't, because I didn't want revenge. Not really. I wanted distance. I wanted peace. And most of all, I wanted to stop needing their approval like it was oxygen. The next morning, I called in sick. I told my boss I had the flu. He didn't believe me, but he didn't press. I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my laptop, and drove 4 hours north to the cabin again. This time, I stayed for a week. At first, I thought I'd go crazy without the noise. No city traffic, no group chats, just trees, wind, and the occasional squirrel scuttling across the roof. But after the second day, I started to feel lighter. I woke up early, drank coffee on the porch, read a book I hadn't touched in years. I even started sketching in an old notepad I found buried in a drawer, something I used to do in college before life got too busy and my family got too loud. One night, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. No agenda, no work, just a blinking cursor. And I started writing. It wasn't anything special, just a few thoughts, memories, things I'd never said out loud. I wrote about my dad, about the quiet strength he carried in his last few months, about how, even when he was dying, he never asked me for anything, but left me the house, the deed, the final vote of confidence no one else in my family had ever offered. I wrote about Thanksgiving, about that photo, about how it felt to be edited out of a life I helped build. It was messy, rambling, personal, but it felt like breathing again. Each day, I added more. Not for anyone else, just for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but that journal, that mess of thoughts and grief and resilience, was the first brick in rebuilding myself. When I returned to the city, I felt different. Not healed, not fixed, but steadier. I reactivated my accounts, changed passwords, closed the emergency savings account. I emailed the bank to follow up on the fraud case and sent a formal request for Lena to repay the money. I knew she wouldn't, but the act of setting the boundary was enough. Then I hired a new lawyer, one that specialized in estate disputes and toxic family dynamics. We went over the original property documents, my dad's note, the transfer agreements, every shred of paper I had that proved my claim. My lawyer, Veronica, sharp as a blade and twice as calm, assured me we had a strong case. They'd have to prove he was coerced, she said, flipping through the files. Which, based on these dates and this note, they won't. They can throw stones. But legally, they're in glass houses. I didn't smile. Not yet. But it was the first time I felt like I wasn't alone in the fight. By February, the dust had started to settle. Lena stopped texting. Josh unfollowed me on everything. My mom sent one last email, short, bitter, and entirely performative. I hope you're happy, Alex. You've divided this family. I didn't respond. Instead, I kept writing. Every morning before work, I'd spend an hour journaling. Then it became 2. Then I started reshaping my entries into essays. Then I submitted one, on a whim, to a small online publication that focused on family estrangement. They accepted it. A week later, they published it under a pseudonym. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of comments from strangers who said they saw themselves in my words. Emails from people who'd gone through something similar. Some even reached out just to say thank you. That night, I cried. Not because of the attention, but because, for the first time, I realized I wasn't broken. Just bent. And bending is not the same as breaking. The essay turned into a series, then a regular column. A few months later, an editor from a mid-sized publishing house contacted me and asked if I'd ever considered writing a memoir. I laughed at the idea at first. Who'd want to read about me? But then I remembered the voicemails, the fake smiles in those family photos, the cold silence that followed every moment I dared to speak up. Maybe someone would want to read that. Maybe someone needed to. So I said yes. I signed the contract in early April. The advance wasn't massive, but it was more than symbolic. It meant my story had value, that I had value, even without their approval, especially without it. I still live in the same apartment, still walk past the same coffee shop each morning. But something in me has shifted. I don't flinch when I see a family photo anymore. I don't check my phone waiting for texts that never come. I still miss them, sometimes, in a blurry, echo-like way. But I don't need them. And that, more than anything, is what freedom feels like. I'm no longer chasing peace from people who feed on chaos. I'm building it myself, brick by quiet, steady brick. And just when I thought things had finally leveled out, just when I thought I could finally move on, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox from their lawyer, with one sentence that made my blood run cold. We are requesting immediate mediation regarding ownership of the property located at. The envelope was thick, cream-colored with a raised crest on the corner that screamed expensive in the most passive-aggressive way possible. Inside, 2 pages of cold legal jargon with one goal, to scare me. But I wasn't scared. Not this time. I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter in one hand, my phone in the other, rereading the phrase that kept buzzing in my brain. Immediate mediation. It sounded civil, polite even, but the subtext was clear. My family had officially declared war. They weren't just bluffing anymore. They were trying to take the house my dad left me, the house I rescued from foreclosure, the house they used to host their peaceful Thanksgiving without me. And now they wanted it back. Through the courts. I could practically hear my mother's voice in the background of that decision, dripping with self-righteous confidence. We're just setting things right. He doesn't deserve it anyway. At first, I was furious, then oddly calm. There's something strangely empowering about watching someone tip their hand after months of backstabbing. Now that they'd made the first legal move, I could finally stop guessing their intentions and start planning my defense and my offense. I called Veronica immediately. She answered on the second ring. Let me guess. Mediation request. They actually filed it, I said, my voice level. They want to mediate ownership of the house. She didn't sound surprised. I figured they'd pull something like this once they realized you weren't going to back down. Can they win? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Not unless you roll over, she said. Mediation doesn't mean they have a case. It just means they want to settle things outside of court, hoping you'll compromise. I'm not compromising, I said. Good, she replied. Because now we get strategic. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Veronica to gather everything. Every document, every dated email, every note from my dad, even a series of old voicemails where he mentioned the house and how proud he was that I took care of things. We pulled phone records, utility bills, even screenshots of texts where Lena and Josh casually acknowledged I paid the taxes, including the infamous good luck screenshot I sent Uncle Rob. But legal battles aren't just about facts. They're about perception, narrative, timing. And if they wanted to make this personal, I was prepared to meet them head on. I spent hours drafting a statement for the mediator, but not one of those cold, lawyer-written blurbs. I wrote it myself, from the heart. I talked about growing up in that house, about the years I spent fixing it, financially and physically, about how I let my mom live there rent-free, out of obligation and love, even when she treated me like an outsider. I didn't paint myself as a martyr. I painted myself as the son who showed up when no one else did. Veronica looked over my draft and nodded. This will hit hard, she said, especially if we let them go first. You think they'll lie? They won't have to, she replied. They'll exaggerate, spin, minimize your contributions, and maximize their own. It's what people do when they're losing. And I wanted them to lose. But I didn't just want to win the house. I wanted to take the mask off, to expose the quiet rot in my family's foundation, the manipulation, the favoritism, the years of rewriting history to make themselves feel better about how they treated me. So I started planning something else, something outside of the legal system. A story. I decided to finish the memoir. The publishing deal was still on the table. My editor had been checking in every month or so, politely nudging me for updates. I'd been dragging my feet, afraid of the emotional cost. But now, with the mediation looming, I knew it was time. I retitled the manuscript, The Leftover Son, and I poured everything into it. The stories I'd buried. The ones I thought no one would believe, like the time I got a job offer in another state and my mom cried for 2 days, not because she'd miss me, but because I didn't ask for her advice first. Or the time Josh crashed my car and told everyone I was the reckless one. Or the night Lena borrowed money to pay rent and then posted Instagram stories from a rooftop bar in Miami. I wrote about the Thanksgiving photo, the cold call from my mom, the voicemail that still sat on my phone like a scar I refused to delete. I changed names, masked details, but the truth was unmistakable. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I sent the draft to my editor on a Friday morning. By Sunday night, she called me in tears. "This is powerful," she said. "It's raw and honest and uncomfortable in the best way. Are you sure you're ready for people to read this?" "I'm sure," I said, because I was done hiding. A week before the scheduled mediation, something strange happened. I got a text from Josh. "Hey, you free to talk?" No apology, no context, just that. I didn't respond. An hour later, a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. It was him. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Slower. "Hey man, I don't know what mom told you, but I didn't want to get lawyers involved. I told her this was a bad idea. I told her you wouldn't back down. She thinks you owe her. I dunno. I didn't want this to get ugly." That made me laugh. Ugly. We'd passed ugly 10 miles ago, and were headed straight into catastrophic. He ended the voicemail with a muttered, "Call me if you want." I didn't, but I listened to that message 5 times. Not because I was moved, but because I was studying him. His tone, his wording, and it confirmed something I'd suspected for a long time. Josh wasn't the ringleader. He was the weapon, and mom was the one holding him. I shared the voicemail with Veronica. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to use this?" she asked. "Not in court," I said, "but it's good to know where his head is." 3 days before mediation, Lena called me. No voicemail, just one long text. "You're tearing this family apart. If you go through with this, don't ever expect us to speak to you again. You're dead to me." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed one word. "Okay." Because if they needed me to be the villain in their story, so be it. I'd be the villain who protected what was his. I'd be the villain who stopped pretending. And I wasn't alone anymore. My publisher had scheduled the book for an early summer release. The column was still gaining traction. Readers had started emailing regularly, asking for updates, sharing their own stories. One woman told me she left an abusive mother after reading my essay. Another man said he showed his sister my words when she accused him of overreacting to being excluded from Christmas. It was no longer just about my story. It was about every person who'd been made to feel like they were too much or not enough. I didn't share these wins with anyone in my family. They wouldn't have cared. But I kept the emails, printed them, taped one to my fridge. "Thank you for saying the thing I was never allowed to say." The night before mediation, I barely slept. But I didn't toss and turn from anxiety. I rehearsed. I visualized the room, the faces, the conversation. I imagined my mother twisting the facts, Lena rolling her eyes, Josh pretending to be neutral. And I saw myself, calmly, clearly, holding the truth. The legal truth. The emotional truth. The truth they'd buried for years. And I was ready to dig it up. Because this wasn't just a mediation. It was the stage for the final reveal. And I had one last card to play. A surprise they wouldn't see coming. Mediation was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in a beige office building downtown. The kind of place with abstract art on the walls and complimentary mints in glass bowls. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy blue blazer and carrying a slim folder under my arm. Not too aggressive, not too casual, just enough to look composed and unshakable. Veronica was already there, flipping through her notes with the same quiet intensity she always had. She greeted me with a nod, and I appreciated that she didn't ask how I was doing. That kind of question felt useless at this point. We both knew what this was. The final round. The reveal. We were escorted into a neutral conference room with a long wooden table and padded chairs. Across from me sat my mother, Lena, and a man in a sharp suit who looked like he billed in 15-minute increments. Josh wasn't there. No surprise. He never showed up when things got real. My mother looked rehearsed. Her hair was perfect. Makeup subtle. She wore a muted cardigan and a pearl necklace, like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie called Grieving Matriarch Falsely Accused. Lena didn't meet my eyes. She scrolled through her phone as if the whole thing bored her. The mediator, a balding man with glasses and the voice of a guidance counselor, opened with pleasantries. Veronica and I stayed quiet, letting them go first. That was our plan. Always let the lie come out before the truth does. Let them dig the hole, then hand them the shovel. Their lawyer opened with a speech that would have been laughable if it wasn't so meticulously crafted. The home in question has been in the family for decades. Our clients argue that the 2017 deed transfer to Mr. Alex Coleman occurred under duress, during a time when the original owner, Mr. Ronald Coleman, was experiencing diminished mental capacity. They allege that Mr. Coleman unduly influenced his father, isolating him from the rest of the family and exploiting his illness to gain control of the property. I blinked slowly, not because I was surprised, but because hearing it spoken out loud felt like touching ice. My mother sniffled. Actually sniffled. As if on cue. Veronica didn't flinch. When the lawyer finished, she leaned forward, hands calmly folded. "We'll address every point," she said. "But first, I'd like to enter into record the following exhibits. The notarized deed, Mr. Ronald Coleman's medical evaluation from 2016 showing no cognitive impairment, a signed letter from his primary care physician affirming his decision-making capacity, and audio files dated from late 2017 in which Mr. Ronald Coleman discusses his intention to transfer the home to his eldest son due to his financial stability and responsible track record." She slid the documents across the table like she was dealing poker chips. The other lawyer's expression tightened. My mother's eyes darted toward the pages. Lena froze. Veronica didn't stop. "We also have multiple bank statements showing Mr. Alex Coleman paid the property taxes, maintenance costs, and emergency repairs on the home for 5 consecutive years, during which the plaintiffs contributed $0. She glanced at me. I nodded. "Lastly," she added, "we have correspondence from Ms. Lena Coleman explicitly thanking Mr. Coleman for covering the taxes, which we're happy to read aloud." Lena shot up straighter. "That was taken out of context." "No," Veronica said simply. "It was taken from your phone." The mediator raised a hand, trying to maintain order. "Let's allow everyone to speak in turn." So I spoke. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I just told the truth. I talked about my dad's last months. About the legal process of the transfer. About the night I found the roof leaking and spent $3,000 fixing it without telling anyone. I talked about the years I paid the bills, quietly, while letting my mom live there out of guilt and obligation. Only to be told I brought too much drama to Thanksgiving. I pulled out the final piece. A handwritten note from my dad. "Alex, this house is yours now. Thank you for being the one I could count on. Keep it safe." My mother closed her eyes when I read it. Not from pain, from recognition. She remembered that note. She'd seen it once before. Probably thought I'd lost it. She was wrong. When I finished, there was a long silence. The kind of silence that felt like something had shifted, not in volume, but in gravity. The mediator cleared his throat. Would the plaintiffs like to respond? My mother opened her mouth. But then something strange happened. Lena spoke first. "I didn't want to do this," she said, still looking at her phone. "This whole thing is stupid." My mother turned to her sharply. "Lena." "No," Lena snapped. "You told me we had a case. You told me Alex manipulated Dad. But that's not what happened. We just didn't like that he had something we didn't." She finally looked at me, and for the first time in years, there was something close to guilt in her eyes. "You were the only one who showed up," she said. "We didn't. And Mom, you hated that." My mother went pale. Her mouth worked for a moment, but no words came. The mediator raised his eyebrows. "So, are you withdrawing your claim?" Lena nodded slowly. Their lawyer looked stunned. My mother said nothing. Afterward, Veronica and I left in silence. We didn't need to say anything. We'd won. Officially. The house was mine. Undisputed, legally and morally. But that wasn't the victory I celebrated most. The next morning, my publisher called. "We got a green light to go big," she said. "National marketing, bookstore rollout, the works. You might want to sit down." I didn't sit down. I stood there in my kitchen, barefoot, staring out the window as she told me the numbers. The pre-orders. The buzz. The fact that one of the biggest morning shows had reached out for an interview. She laughed. "You know what this is, right?" "What?" "Revenge," she said. "But classy." I spent the next few weeks wrapping up the manuscript, finalizing media appearances, and preparing for release. The book hit shelves in early June. Within a month, it was everywhere. Bookstores, podcasts, Kindle charts. Even my old college roommate texted me, "Dude, you're viral on TikTok." Apparently, someone had uploaded a dramatic reading of Chapter 4, the one where I wrote about being disinvited from Thanksgiving, and it exploded. Millions of views. hundreds of thousands of comments. And one by one, messages started rolling in. From strangers, from acquaintances, even from a few extended family members who'd once stayed silent. But the best message came from Josh. A text. I read the book. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Forgiveness isn't a text message. It's not owed. And sometimes, it's not even necessary. I never spoke to my mother again. Last I heard, she moved in with her sister across the state. Lena kept her distance. I think part of her meant what she said in that room. But it didn't matter, because I stopped measuring my healing by their behavior. Instead, I planted roots in the truth. And one summer morning, I sat on the porch of my house, coffee in hand, breeze in my face, and watched the sunrise break through the trees. A house once filled with their noise was finally quiet, peaceful. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't because I was gone. It was because they were. They tried to erase me from the story, so I wrote the ending myself.